When I think about the most unexpected moments of my life, one stands out so vividly that it still brings a soft smile to my face. It was the summer of discovery, laughter, and friendship, the kind that leaves you changed in the best way possible. My name is Emily Carter, and this is the story of how a simple trip with a stranger turned into an unforgettable journey that redefined how I saw myself and the world around me. I had been working as a graphic designer in Seattle for nearly 5 years. My life was neat, structured, and predictable, maybe a little too predictable. Every day was the same rhythm: wake up, coffee, work, lunch, more work, and sleep. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped noticing how gray my world had become. My best friend, Madison, noticed before I did. One evening, she sat me down after work with a mischievous grin. "You need a break, Em," she said. "A real one. No laptop, no deadlines, no checking your emails. Just sunshine and new air." I laughed it off, but Madison had already booked me on a small group hiking trip through the Rocky Mountains. I was hesitant. Hiking wasn't really my thing, but something inside me whispered that maybe she was right. I needed to breathe again. When I arrived at the meeting spot in Colorado, I met the group of travelers I'd be joining. There were 8 of us in total, led by a cheerful guide named Tom. Among them was a man who stood out, not because he was loud or flashy, but because he seemed genuinely content to be there. His name was Ryan Mitchell. He had a kind smile and an easy way of talking that made even silence feel comfortable. The first few days were rough. My legs burned from the climbs, and the thin mountain air left me gasping. But Ryan was always there, walking beside me, offering quiet encouragement. "You're doing great, Emily," he'd say whenever I stopped to catch my breath. He never rushed me or made me feel out of place. Instead, he helped me notice things I had overlooked: the wildflowers tucked between rocks, the sound of wind moving through the pine trees, and the way the sunlight changed the color of the valley below us. By the 4th day, something inside me had shifted. I began waking up early to watch the sunrise. I found joy in the simplicity of boiling water for coffee on a camp stove, laughing with the group, and sharing stories under a blanket of stars. I realized how little I'd truly lived before this, how much of life I had been missing while staring at screens. One evening, as the group settled near a lake, Ryan asked if I wanted to take a walk. We followed a narrow trail that curved along the water's edge. The sky was painted in soft hues of orange and pink, the kind that make you wish time could freeze. "You ever think about how small we are?" Ryan asked quietly, looking out across the mountains. "It's humbling. Makes you realize what really matters." His words lingered in my mind long after we returned to camp. I didn't know it then, but that conversation would become a turning point for me. The next morning, I woke to find the group gathered around breakfast, but Ryan wasn't there. Tom said he had gone ahead to scout the trail for the day. Something about that felt unusual, but I brushed it off. We started hiking soon after, winding through steep cliffs and lush meadows. When we reached a clearing halfway up the trail, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks: a small wooden sign nailed to a tree that read, "Look for the view worth the climb." Next to it was a note pinned with a small rock. My name was written on it. I turned it over to find Ryan's handwriting. "Follow the stream until you hear the waterfall." My heart skipped. I followed the narrow stream, the sound of rushing water growing louder with every step. When I finally reached it, I gasped. Before me was a hidden waterfall, tall and graceful, cascading into a crystal clear pool surrounded by wildflowers. And there stood Ryan, smiling. "I wanted you to see this before the others," he said. "You've been pushing through fear and doubt all week. This is your reward." It wasn't about romance, it was about friendship, kindness, and a shared appreciation for life's beauty. I sat beside him, soaking in the peaceful sound of the waterfall. "I can't believe I almost missed all of this," I whispered. Ryan looked at me thoughtfully. "Most people do, until something wakes them up." The rest of the trip felt different. I laughed more. I talked freely. I even led the group one day when Tom asked for a volunteer. By the end of the week, it wasn't just a trip anymore, it was a chapter in my life that marked the beginning of something new. When it was time to say goodbye, Ryan handed me a small stone from the waterfall site. "So you don't forget the view worth the climb," he said. Back in Seattle, I returned to my job, but my perspective had completely changed. I started taking weekend trips, joining art workshops, and even volunteering for environmental causes. I felt alive again. The city lights didn't seem as gray anymore, and even my morning coffee tasted different, richer somehow. Months later, I received a postcard from Ryan. It was a photo of another mountain, somewhere in Utah. The note was simple: found another view worth the climb. Hope you're still discovering yours. I smiled, feeling that same warmth I'd felt standing by the waterfall. Sometimes, the universe sends you people not to stay forever, but to remind you of who you are, and who you can become. Ryan was one of those people for me. That trip didn't just change my summer. It changed my life.